Today's project is going to be installing an automatic gen start system on my Cummins Onan 5500 gasoline generator. Now, Onan does offer gen start systems for both gasoline and diesel. The installations are very similar, so watching this video, it'll give you a good idea on how to do it for any of their generator offerings. So I'm going to be using their latest offering, which is the EC-AGS Plus generator start system. And I'll talk about some of the pros and cons around this gen start system, some of the features. We'll go over exactly how to install it, how to operate it, things like that. So let's go ahead and get started. So let's move on to why do you want or need a gen start system? Well, there's really three main reasons I can think of that most people are concerned with. First of all is temperature control. You want your gen start system so that it will fire up an air conditioner in the case that you have pets in the RV when you're away. This is a little added assurance that your pets will remain safe. Again, don't count 100% on your gen start. There are other systems as well you can add that will monitor the temperature of RV, and it will send you an email or an alert or something like that on your phone. So if you've got pets, you might want to look into those systems. The second reason most people want it is to maintain their batteries. So if you're going to have your RV sitting for a couple weeks and maybe you leave the refrigerator on or something like that that's got a pretty decent draw, a gen start system will make sure those batteries stay topped off and that stuff keeps running. But be aware, most gen start systems will not run continuously forever. They will time out. And I believe this one here times out like 30 days. So if you don't touch it for 30 days, it shuts itself off. So be aware of that, read the manual, find out if the gen start system you choose will continuously run or if you need to take some kind of action. And the third tip, this is really my own. It's pure laziness. I have no other explanation but that. So in the middle of winter when it's cold out and you're counting on that fireplace that you have and you're in bed and you're nice and warm and it starts to get cold, you want to start the generator. So you got to take that long walk from the bedroom to the front of the RV to start the generator. And then, 30 minutes later, when everything's nice and warm, you get up and take that long walk again to shut it off. And it's kind of rinse and repeat motion for the entire night. With a system like this, it is app controlled, as you can see here, and you can just pull out your phone, hit a button, the generator will start or it will stop. So before I move on too far in the video, a lot of questions come up about, what about lithium? I've got lithium batteries. Everything I read about these gen start systems say they don't work with lithiums. Well, we need to clarify that. Yes, they will work with lithium batteries. They will start your engine on your generator, but there are certain features that may not work as expected. Okay, so the things that you want to be aware of is, first of all, your lithium battery. You need to know what kind of BMS it has in that battery and what amp draw it supports. Now, you can find the specs on Onan that might tell you how many amps the generator will pull upon startup, and you simply need to make sure that is not more than your lithium battery can deliver. And in today, I typically see at least 100 amp BMS in any of the lithium batteries, or if you have multiple batteries, you add those amp draws up, and you should definitely have enough to start the generator. So that's probably less of a concern now than when the lithiums first came out. The second thing that you want to be aware of is the feature that's not lithium compatible is the battery voltage sensing. Okay, a lead acid battery or an AGM battery has a very obvious curve. As the voltage drops, that also shows the capacity of your batteries drop. So when you're at 12.8 volts on a lead acid or AGM battery, that's 100% full. When you get down to 12 volts, you're empty. So there's a linear scale in there. When you go to a lithium battery, it's a very flat scale. You're going to be over 13 volts the entire time until the very, very end of that battery charge, and then it's going to drop off drastically. So these systems have a hard time knowing the charge state of a lithium battery. They just can't sense it. So what happens is, if you try to use that feature, unless you get the exact point when that battery starts to drop off, it might be so low that it doesn't have enough to start the battery. So the companies have decided to just say, hey, it's not lithium compatible. All right, so let me talk a little bit about why I chose the Onan EC-AGS Plus system as my GenStar system. You know, there are other systems out there. There's an older Onan system called the EC30. Many of the older RVs came with that system. There is a system from Magnum Energy if you're running the Magnum inverter. There's also the Victron Serbo system that you can get. So there's a number of systems available, but I chose the Onan. This particular system, one was for compatibility, right? It's an Onan product on an Onan generator. If I've got problems, Onan should be able to figure out what's going on. And I'm not going between 2 or 3 vendors and trying to figure out exactly what happened. Second is simple to install, right? That's the biggest benefit of this system, is I don't have to wire my entire RV. So the old EC30 system and some of the other ones, you were running wires to a thermostat and to a battery and to your ignition, and it took hours and hours to get those systems installed due to all of the manual labor. This system eliminates a whole lot of that. Third is app control. I wanted to be able to control this thing from a smartphone, and it's going to give me the ability to do that, whereas the older systems didn't have that capability. So that's really an added bonus. Cost. I bought my system, it was between Thanksgiving and Christmas, so I did get that kind of Black Friday special. At the time, I think the special was like $200 for this, so I thought that was quite a deal. That was probably $100 or more off the system. But even at the full price, you know, I still think the system was worth it due to ease of install, you know, against the cost. Also, it has some other features, right? It will, I can program in an after hours quiet time. So if I'm at a park or somewhere where they don't allow the generator to run from, let's say 10 p.m. to 8 a.m., I can program that in and the system will handle it. So there's quite a few features that are worth. Now, there are a couple cons. One I just mentioned here about the lithium batteries. It's officially not lithium compatible. So if you've got lithium batteries, that's something, you know, you might not get the battery charging, you know, function to work right because the generator doesn't know exactly when to start. I think you can play with that feature. You might get it to work, but be aware of that. And the second con is app control. It was one of the pros that I just mentioned, but the downside is there is no switch, no manual switch whatsoever on this system. So if you have a problem with the app, or you don't have your phone with you or anything like that, how do you turn it on? There is not a way to turn it on. So that's something that I would hope that Onan will address in the future, is to put some kind of switch somewhere on one of these modules to allow you to turn it on or off and at least go with the last program state. So I hope they do make that change. Okay, let's talk about what comes in the box. First of all, you're going to get this card here that's going to serve as an explanation of what the components are, and then it's going to take you to their website using this QR code or the link here, and this will explain in a PDF how to operate the system, the components, recommended install procedures, things like that. Unfortunately, it does lack a little bit on the install procedures. It didn't really give you a real life install, so that's hopefully what this video is going to give you today, is show you a real life install. Next, the component you got here is the gateway. This is the brains of the system. So this is really the most important component of this thing, and Onan makes explicit comments in their documentation that say, do not install this inside the generator compartment. They want it installed near the generator, but not inside its compartment. And I believe that's because they're worried about heat and possibly contamination, from fumes and things like that. So you can put it in the same compartment, just not inside the generator itself. So I want to make sure I got that clear. So if you've got room in your compartment, just kind of put it off to the side and you should be fine. The next component here is the temperature sensor. Now you can get up to 3 of these to work with this unit. So if you've got a large RV and you multiple air conditioners, things like that, you can put these around the RV and it will use that information to tell when to start the generator. In my case, I've got the single one. I think this will do fine. The key though is to install this near your thermostat that you already have, because you want this reading very close to what your thermostat's reading in the RV. You're typically going to program the AGS to start a few degrees higher than what your air conditioners are set at. That way, in the case of a power loss, the temperature will go up a few degrees past when the AC wants to turn on. It'll fire up the generator. The generator will run until it gets to the temperature, and then it will shut the generator off. Okay. Next is you've got a series of cables here, and it's really a pretty simple install. What you've got here is about a 6-foot lead. One of these leads is going to plug into the gateway. Okay. Next, you're going to take this end here, and you've got this Y harness, and this is going to plug into one end, and the other end here is going to be on the generator itself. You're going to be splitting a cable, and you're going to be putting one end in here and the other end in here. So that's basically the harness. And then the final connection are these 3 wires. 2 of these are going to go to your batteries. One to a chassis battery, like your engine battery, and the other one is going to go to your house batteries. That allows the GenStart to sense voltage off of both battery banks and decide based on your programming when you want it to start. And again, just be aware of the lithium differences that we talked about earlier. And then I believe there's a ground. So the other additional items I'm not showing here that it talks about you're going to need is you're going to need a fuse. So anytime you're going to run a wire to a battery, you need a fuse on there just to protect it. The manual will tell you the size of fuse. I believe it's 5 amps. And then you're going to need some wire, because your chassis battery, most likely the chassis battery is not what's starting your generator. That's probably going to be your house batteries, but you need to verify that because every RV can be wired differently. So you're going to have a connection right at the generator that you can put, whichever wire on that battery. The other wire, you're going to be running maybe a 20, 30, 40 foot wire to get to that other battery if that's the closest point to be able to sense the voltage. So you're going to need some 12 gauge wire, however long you need to get to that battery, as well as that fuse and fuse holder that I mentioned. That's going to really wrap up what it's going to take in the system, how the wiring goes. Now we just need to go and perform the actual install. So I'll walk through that and show the decisions that I made, and then we'll get into the operation. All right, so here's what my temperature sensor setup looks like. I've got my thermostat down here, and in my case, I've got multiple zones because I have 2 air conditioners. And this is the temp sensor that goes with the thermostat. And then I mounted their temperature sensor right next to it. So again, you want to make sure you have these guys very close to each other so that this is reading as close to this as possible. The second thing is make sure that your air conditioning vents are not pointed towards these sensors. If they are, you're going to get false readings here. It's going to be a lot cooler. You're going to be short cycling your air conditioner, and you don't want that to happen. So if you simply point these away from it, it'll cause the room to cool more, and these will read a little bit more accurate. All right, so I'm choosing to install the gateway. I didn't want to put it in here, even though, you know, it's not technically inside the compartment of the generator. But rather than putting it here, which would have been a really tight fit, what I'm doing is there's a grommet here where the wires can go through. And then you can't see it, but there's a little space behind here where I can get my wires through and come up through this area right here. Now, unfortunately, you do have to cut a hole large enough for that connector to make it through, because you've got another large connector on the other end. So you got to make something big enough to get this guy to go through. So when it comes up through the top, and then I'm going to put my gateway right here. It'll be a straight up shot. I can even keep the extra coiled up in here, but that's probably the worst part of this install so far, is just having to cut this hole out. Okay, now that I've fed my long harness through the grommet here, the next thing is to find your connector that was existing in your generator. Mine was just tucked here, back in here and behind. Pull that out. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate this connector, and you just have to lift up this tab, pull these apart. All right, so I've got it connected. And again, you can't really mess this step up because it's all male and female ends. They're only going to go in one way. So this is the one coming off originally, the generator connection. It's going to connect into the bottom end of the Y harness. It's going to plug right in. If I follow this Y harness down, this is the other connector that originally was connected on here. These guys were connected together, so now the Y harness goes in there, as you can see. And then the third end goes over to your long harness that is going to go up to the gateway. Okay, so what I'll do here is I'll kind of tidy all this up, probably zip tie it all, kind of tuck it back into here. You know, again, you don't want to get too far back into there, kind of keep it away from the motor as best you can, but it should sit in there nicely. I just completed wiring up the AGS, and I wired this up in a way I think most people are going to consider doing. Once I'm done with this, we're going to try to do a test start and see how it works. So what I've done here is there's 3 wires, if you remember, coming off of this harness here. And one of the wires, I attached a fuse holder, and I found the 12-volt connection that starts the generator right near where the harness was, so I wired into that. The next wire is a ground wire, and there's a ground screw. They actually marked ground right behind here. So I put the ground wire there. And then the third wire, which is the gray wire, is to monitor your chassis battery. So unfortunately, I have no chassis battery connection back here at the rear of the coach. So I was forced to run a wire all the way across my coach in a wire loom and then go up the side. And I chose a slightly different option than what the manual says, and I'll show you that here. So I chose to run the third wire, the gray wire, which is meant to monitor your chassis battery. I elected to bring it in here to my battery control center versus going directly to the battery under the hood. The reason I did that was I didn't want any kind of parasitic draw while I had the RV in the off position when I was storing it for weeks or months at a time. I didn't want any parasitic draw to drain my battery. So my battery control center, I've got power coming in here, okay? And it's gonna come up to a disconnect solenoid. And then when that solenoid is turned on with my switches above my door, power will transfer through, and then I can tap in on this side. So what that looks like is I have my chassis battery coming in back here, and then here is where it'll switch through the solenoid, and you can see I've connected a fuse holder with a 5-amp fuse directly into there. It's also similar with how I have the AGS tied directly to that battery post on the generator. That also comes through here. That's going to come in my coach battery here, and it's going to come through the solenoid and then come out this other post, which is going chassis, coach. It's going to come out the generator. So it'll come in this way, come across, and come down. And I know the manual says don't have the AGS on a switch circuit, But again, I was worried about parasitic draw, and this will provide AGS only when I actually have my switches on. So you may want to consider it one way or the other. I could not find a specification in the Onan manual that would tell me how much draw that the AGS would take even in an idle state. I'm sure there's some draw there, so I may measure that with a meter, but again, this is how I wired mine. Okay, now I'm going to get ready to do a startup test. I'm just going to do a manual start test using the app. I do not have the air conditioning set to turn on or anything like that. It's just going to start the generator when I push the button. Now, what I'm also doing here is I am monitoring the voltage, because I think there's a problem with connecting the wires the way that I've connected them. And this may lead to why many of you are having unsuccessful operation with this Gen Start. So this is a theory, but let's go ahead and see if that pans out. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and try a manual start. And basically in the application, we're gonna hit the start button, and let's see what happens while we're monitoring the voltage. Okay, you might have saw there that the voltage went down into the 11 volt range, but also the app disconnected. So I'm going to try that again, staying focused on the app screen, and let's see what happens. So as you can see, there is a problem with the app or the gateway disconnecting. So I have some theories behind that. The Gen Start is running off of the coach battery, which is also the battery that it's pulling, the generator's pulling in order to start. And I think that voltage drop may be causing an issue here. So as a trial, kind of a debugging thing, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to switch the wires. So I'm going to have the AGS running off the chassis battery. That way it shouldn't be affected by any voltage loss coming across the wire, and we'll see if that makes any difference or not. Okay, so I swapped the wires around, and I'm just using some temporary wiring nuts. So please don't install your final system with wiring nuts. Make sure you use crimped on connectors with some heat shrink, things like that. But what I did was, the red wire is intended to go to the battery you're going to have power to that starts your generator. So I'm going to call that my coach battery, okay? That wire is now connected to my engine battery. And the engine battery, which is the gray wire, is now actually connecting to my coach battery. So I just simply flip those around. The theory is, when you start the generator, that there's enough voltage loss that it's causing the AGS to trip. Maybe it's the Bluetooth tripping out, or it's the switch internally in it. Something is going on that's causing that AGS to reset. And what I was originally seeing, and this was off camera, I wish I could have caught it, but I didn't, is my generator would try to start for like one crank. So it would crank and it would die. A second later, it would crank and it would die. And it would do that 4 or 5 or 6 times in a row. And I never got anything logged in the application. It just didn't start the generator. So that's what got me onto this theory. Now, what I'm going to do now is try to start it again through the app. And let's see if this makes any difference with the AGS connected to the engine battery that does not have a load pulled against it. So I think we might be onto something. I think this could be the problem a lot of people are having. Even though Onan says that the AGS will operate anywhere from 8 to 12 volts, I don't think it's happy with that. Not when you're pulling such a large amp draw. I want to call this a fail on Onan's part because they didn't consider this in their design, right? You've got, most RVs have got their generator towards the rear of the unit, but their batteries are towards the front. So you're going to have a really long cable connecting those two that's going to see a significant voltage drop with a high draw such as this engine. And even though we're only catching, 11 and a half, somewhere in their voltage here, I'm thinking maybe that's just my meter can't capture it fast enough. So I think, it's a fail on Onan's part. They should have designed the AGS to maybe have its own battery source, maybe a little 9-volt battery or something like that to keep it alive. I'm not sure. But it looks like we can work around the problem. Now you have a couple choices. Choice number one could be don't connect here, run your own wire all the way to the batteries that start the generator. Now, chances are the voltage loss will be much less if you run your own wire, because this wire here, run the AGS, this little red one, is really not going to pull any amps. And even on a small 14 gauge wire, you'll probably be okay. Or you can do what I just did. Flip them around. Use the engine battery to keep the AGS alive, and then use the other wire to monitor the coach battery. The only side effect of that is you're going to see down here on your screen, these are going to be flipped. This top one is going to represent the engine battery, and the bottom one is going to represent the house battery. I can live with that. So that's what I'm going to do, and I don't have to run an additional wire. So hopefully this tip will help you out if you've got weird things, weird starting issues like I did. It would kind of crank once and die, and crank another time and die, and crank another time and die. Okay, the next feature that I want to test will be the AGS startup based on temperature. I think this is the feature most of us are looking for. We want, whether we're boondocking or even at an RV park and we have a power loss, we would like to make sure our air conditioning is still running, keep our pets safe, etc. But there's a very strange statement in their instruction manual, and it's right here. It says, it is recommended that the temperature be set to 10 degrees Fahrenheit below the AC thermostat setting. Now, if you think about that, if I have my AC thermostat set to 70 degrees, they want me to set the AGS to 60. Now, in practicality, what's going to happen is, let's pretend it's 65 degrees in my RV. So the GenStart is going to fire up because it's higher than 60, and it's going to start running. And the coach will slowly start to get warmer throughout the day. Eventually, the AC will kick on when it gets above 70. It will cool the coach down until it hits just below 70, and the air will shut off. But it will still be above 60. So my generator is going to keep running, and it's going to run all day. I don't think that's the way we want to operate it. I believe what they were thinking was, we want the generator to start before the air conditioner starts. And even though that's a good theory, that's not how RVs work. Okay, almost every RV that has a generator, when the generator fires up, there's a warm-up period between 30 seconds and a minute before your transfer switch or the air conditioning unit itself, some part of your electronics built into your RV, will wait for power to be available 30 seconds to a minute before it will provide power. So if that's what they're thinking, there's no need for it in most RVs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my AGS to be about 3 to 4 degrees above where my thermostat is set at. So I want my thermostat to trip like it normally would. So in the case I'm in an RV park plugged in, the air conditioning would kick on, everything would be working fine. In the event I had a power loss from the RV park, once that temperature rose to, let's say, 74, 75 degrees, then the generator is going to start and the air conditioning is already wanting to run, so it'll fire up after the warm-up period. That's what I'm going to do here, and let's go ahead and give that a try. Okay, for this test, we're going to be testing the AGS startup based on temperature. So what I've done here is I've gone back to my thermostat on my air conditioning, and I've set those to fire up at 68 degrees. So if the coach is higher than 68 degrees, it's going to ask for air conditioning. Now, you can see my temperature sensor is saying that it's over 71 degrees in the bedroom. And currently I've got the AGS set to not start up until it hits 73 degrees. So we're going to adjust that. So what we do is we come in here and we hit this little gear icon. We come up to Auto Gen Setup. We turn on the air conditioning sense and we set the temperature. So I'm going to lower that down to below what the current temperature is. So I want this to start at, let's say, 69 degrees. And I'm going to hit save. And OK. And I'll come back to my home screen. And now you can see that the bedroom is currently at 71. It's trying to start as soon as it gets to 69 degrees. It should start up the generator, and then the air conditioning will kick on after the warm-up period because it's also set to start up at around 68. So again, these numbers are just so we can prove that this is going to work. Now what I need to do is I need to hit the auto mode. It's going to give me a warning here that you're going to have the auto gen starting and stopping. Hit the acknowledge. And it immediately started because it met all the parameters. You can see the voltage coming in. And it's going to take about 30 seconds to a minute before we'll hear the air conditioning turn on. So I'll pause the video. Okay, I'm sorry for the noise here, but it took about 30 seconds before I got transfer switch power. And then it took another 2 minutes before my air conditioner is turned on. So there's a little bit longer delay on my rig. Give it a couple minutes to warm up. But everything started up and worked perfectly. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait here until the air conditioner shut off or the GenStart shuts off. I'm kind of curious because I couldn't find anything in the manual that talked about how long the AGS will run after it gets to its set temperature. So when these two numbers meet, does it stop immediately? Does it run for a couple extra minutes? I'm not sure, but I'm gonna watch and I'll report back exactly what I find. Okay, so the generator just shut off. And what I noticed was the bedroom temp sensor was at 69.99 when it shut off, where my set temperature was 69. So actually, it shut off before it should have. They should have waited till it got to 68.99. So that's a little bug in their software they're going to need to address. The other thing that I noticed was it shut off immediately. There was no cool down period for the generator at all. As soon as it read that temperature, it shut everything off. And that's not necessarily a good thing because it shut off, which also killed the air conditioners at the same time. And all your manuals will say, remove all loads from the generator, let the generator cool down, and then shut the generator off. But in this system, it's not doing that. What they need, and this is an enhancement request for this system, is they need two temperatures. They need the temperature that you want the GenStart to start at, and they need another temperature where you want it to stop at, and a third feature for a cool down period. So envision your air conditioner is set to start at 70. You set your AGS to start at 75. So the air conditioners are wanting to start, but there's no power. The GenStart will fire up at 75. Air conditioners kick on. They will cool the coach until they hit the second option, which is when should it shut off, and you would set that to maybe 70 with a 5 or 10 minute cool down period. That way it would give the chance for your air conditioners to shut off first, cool down, and then everything would get shut down in a nice orderly fashion. Okay, so this is going to be the second generator start based on temperature. As you can see, my temperature just hit 70, so that went above the 69, and it did start up the generator. I'm waiting for the transfer switch to kick in, which it just did, and it should be around 2 minutes or so before my air conditioners kick in. So I had it start the generator the first time through AGS temp sensing. It shut off, and then I sat and waited for this to occur again, just to prove that it will cycle through multiple times without a problem. So it does seem to be working, and I can call this feature good as far as being able to run multiple times. All right, I thought I'd go through a couple of the other settings. First of all, take a look at what version that I am running of the gateway, and the app version is 101.137 on 222 of 23. And we'll go through each one of these. We'll start at the bottom, AGS settings. So we pick this. You got your temp sensors configured. Okay, your gateway software, you can click the update button. Your gateway nickname, you can pick what you want there. You can also do a factory reset. Okay, your generator history. This is going to show you every time it has stopped and started, or any other errors that you might have. Now, in my case, I have not seen any fault codes, even though this thing did have a couple difficult times starting. I didn't actually register a fault, so it just said, nothing, right? It didn't start. Event history, though, you can see every time it started and stopped. Okay, so we come back here. You can set up your quiet time. Again, you'll just be putting dates and times in here as you turn that on. And then we've already been through the auto gen start for air conditioning sense. And then you can also set it up to do a house battery, and you'll set your voltages there. Final thoughts. Onan has a potential for a huge hit with this system. It's unique in that it doesn't require a lot of additional wiring to set up an AGS system like traditional ones do. It's very easy to install. Any do-it-yourself person can accomplish it. The hardware appears to be solid. The gateway seems well made, and the wiring is of professional quality. Next, the feature set's good. It starts and stops based on temperature and battery voltage while respecting quiet time hours. It's got some safety features, including auto disable while driving, as well as a 10-minute minimum runtime to prevent short cycling. And it's affordable. Both the cost price point and installation costs allow anyone to add AGS to their RV. With a few software modifications, this system could provide as many, if not more, features than more expensive AGS systems may have. I hope you found this video helpful in your decision on the Onan EC-AGS Plus system, whether or not it's right for you. Please like and subscribe. If your kudos is how I get paid for these videos. And stick around for some bonus material. I will see you on the next. Bonus material. So I thought I'd go through a few enhancements that I'd like to see that I think would make the system much better. It would provide more features, improve the features that are already there, and allow us to have more user control over how the system's working. User settable minimum runtime. Currently, the AGS has a minimum runtime built in of 10 minutes. So no matter what the sensors are reporting, once the generator starts, it's going to run a minimum of 10 minutes. I found that not long enough, right? I think in my case, with almost a 3-minute warm-up period between my transfer switch and my air conditioners, that didn't provide enough time for my air conditioner to reach temperature and shut off before possibly the generator would shut down. So if I could adjust that to 15, 20, 25 minutes, I would have a better chance that my air conditioners would shut off and the load would be removed from the generator before the AGS shut the generator down. Charge parameters for the gray wire. Currently, the AGS system is using the red wire to do two things. It's powering the AGS itself, and it's also sensing the voltage of your house batteries. Now, in my case, as you saw in the video, I had problems with that because I have such a long run of the battery cable from the generator to my house batteries. So when I flipped it and I ran the AGS off of the engine battery, I no longer had a problem. But the system doesn't provide me the ability to set charge parameters on the gray wire. I would like to see both wires have charge parameters. So if my engine battery's low, it'll start. My house battery's low, it'll start. If they did that, I would be able to wire the way I did and solve the flaky gateway Bluetooth switch problem that it was having. I would also like to see user labels for the red and gray wire. Currently, as I showed, they were kind of hard coded in for house battery and engine battery. If we're going to wire them, whichever way works best for us, I'd like to be able to change those labels, similar to how you can set a nickname for the gateway. Start off and just say this is the red wire, this is the gray wire, and then let me override that with whatever I want to call my battery banks. Improved temperature control. This system is unique because it's using an external temperature sensor to determine when to start and stop the generator. Now, because it's not tied directly to your thermostat, like some of the traditional systems are when they're hardwired, you've got two components you're trying to match up the temperatures with and make determinations on when to start and stop. I think if they had three parameters, a start temperature, a stop temperature, and a cool down period, we would have much better control that would allow us to run the air conditioner and have it shut off before the generator shuts down. So envision that the temperature is set to 70 on your thermostat and you set your AGS to start at 75. Again, maybe the RV park's power goes out and you want the temperature to go up a little bit before it starts the generator. It'll start it at 75. As it cools down, the stop temperature would match the thermostat, which would be 70. But again, your thermostat's not going to stop immediately, right? They always go down 1 degree, maybe 2 degrees before they actually shut off. So that cool down period of 5, 10 minutes, whatever you find works best in your rig, would give the air conditioner time to shut down before the generator shuts down. Heating and cooling mode. Most AGS systems do not have a mode for heating. They only work for cooling, which is very similar to this system. But with my previous recommendation of a start, stop, and cooling period, they very easily could implement a heating mode because you'd be flipping the temperatures, right? You're not going to start the generator when it gets above a temperature. You're going to start it when it gets below a temperature. And I'd like to see that feature because I like to use either my heat pump or my fireplace to heat my rig in the wintertime, rather than the furnace, which really dries out the environment. So if I could set my AGS to work on those parameters, I think it very easily they could provide a heating mode as well. Generator hours reset. So in the software, you can see there is a feature that tracks how many hours the generator has been running since, in this case, it was first set up. I think their intention was to be able to reset that anytime you did maintenance on the generator, such as an oil change. But the software is missing that feature to be able to reset that. They should include that. The next thing I'd like to see is these two batteries here. They're just showing you an icon that says 100%, 75%, what have you. And I would like to actually see the voltage there. So 100%, whatever, that doesn't mean a lot. I mean, you got the graph that's showing you that. I actually want to see a voltage here. And if it can read the voltage and put it on the screen, I mean, obviously it's doing it down here for a temp sensor. So you would think maybe they'd have something available for voltage. I think that would be more helpful, because again, where you're connecting those wires can really matter as far as voltage goes. If you measure voltage at the battery, like in my case, my battery's underneath my step, I might read 12.8 volts. But if I get clear down where the generator is, that might read 12.7 or even maybe 12.65, because I'm going to have a voltage loss across that 30-foot cable. So I want to understand that better, which will help me set my parameters for when I want the gen start to start and stop. I hope you found this video helpful in your decision on the Onan EC-AGS Plus system, whether or not it's right for you. Please like and subscribe. If your kudos is how I get paid for these videos. I will see you on the next.